believe it's a camera as well.
The camera is the black thing.
Is that just the microphone?
That's the microphone, yeah.
Is it alive?
I'm not sure.
What would you say?
Good answer.
You just have to guess. How do you feel?
I'd say it's about 50-50.
What are you doing? Terrorizing.
So if I start talking shit about Jonah,
Oh, it'll get back to him. I'll make sure. I'll just repeat it.
take quite a bit. Actually, after seeing Hawaiian shirts, I feel like I've got it just back on.
Everything's right there.
They came geared up, right? Is Jason Russell judging in here?
Yeah.
Is it? Huh?
You're hoping so.
No, don't count on it.
Awesome. Oh, you right there? Nice. I have to go to the bathroom because it's responsible, so I'm not going to delay the debate later. If that's okay with you.
I approve.
I know you're pretty tough on the hall pass, but. Good news is I glow on paper, so my preparation's not too long.
I guess we should start.
Do we each have to click
I
start?
think they want us to, but standard, will you just say all of us are starting?
Oh, I clicked it for myself.
Oh, okay, good.
Confirmed on behalf of me and Jonas.
Awesome. I don't understand why they don't just have the chair confirm that everyone is here and
That's
starting.
what I thought was happening.
Right.
And I was part of the 22 that apparently is not.
I also thought
Just have the chair confirm that everyone's.
Yes.
That makes sense.
I also thought that, like last round, that are we, if I'm the last person to enter my decision, then do I have to announce the decision? What's going on here?
The first name on the pairing, or the first name read,
Right.
is the chair, and they are the one that does the reply at the end.
Who received that honor in this space?
I actually haven't even.
I'm not going because I'm not listening. Well, I like
Mr.
the
Russell.
chair.
I'm
You are the
charge.
chair.
God, this is gonna go. This is off the rails already.
Just don't lead the announcement the wrong way.
I've done it before, man. It's actually really embarrassing.
Okay, is everyone ready?
Yep.
Alright. Plan the United States federal government should establish a domestic climate policy through the implementation of the Clean Power Plan. Advantage 1 is Paris. Trump makes the CPP more essential and ensures international follow-on with Paris. Davenport. In 16, if Mr. Trump makes good on his promises, that legacy would unravel Trump out to dismantle the Clean Power Plan. If Trump steps back from that, it will make it much less likely the world will ever meet that target. He can weaken rules that they would have little impact on reducing emissions. That could doom the Paris Agreement's goal of reducing carbon dioxide emissions. There is little hope that the CPP will survive in the Supreme Court. Other key emitter nations, especially India, now have little reason to follow through. The Clean Power Plan is the ambitious centerpiece. If enacted, the rules could transform the American electricity sector. Now the CPP is the foundation of the U.S. commitment to Paris. Upholding it locks in reductions and overcomes Trump's attempts to rip it up. Storm. In 16, Trump will have no obligation to meet any specific emissions targets, but whether Trump can actually achieve his result turns on his ability to reverse the CPP under domestic law to kill the CPP. Trump can either convince the court to strike down the regulation, or he can arrange for the EPA to rescind it. The U.S. is the world's second largest emitter, and its participation in the Paris Agreement is the the agreement's success and participation of other signatories was premised on the participation of the United States. That the U.S. is viewed as failing to live up, other countries might be less incentivized to follow through on their own commitments. Now policies are more important than tweets. Ensuring policies like the CPP overcomes any of Trump's rhetoric. Yale 360 and 16. Trump must choose whether he will continue to deny the crisis and stand alone in his position, or result in significant blowback, but he could also shift course and support clean energy. Will he listen? That will be the test. Without the Clean Power Plan, the U.S. will surely miss its targets. Without the vigorous participation in the world's largest economy, other countries may also slack off. Twitter messages cannot be taken as signals of likely future policies. The result could be that the Paris Agreement unravels. Trump may be able to reverse course on climate change policy. Now Paris is sufficient to solve global warming policies, modeling induced innovation like the Planner, Key, Shell, and Huber et al. In 16, analysts have claimed that 2 degrees Celsius is untenable, but they failed to underpin their hypothesis. A recent study maintains that warming could be confined to 1.5 degrees Paris, invites the IPCC to explore pathways consistent with the lower, and a chance to deliver can be generated by a plausible route to avoid recourse to negative emissions. Renewable energies could be scaled up, explosion will be matched by induced implosion. What could be concrete triggers? The Pareto principle could come into play. The decarbonization will be led by a critical minority of key agents. The NDCs may initialize and accelerate diversion of pathways away from fossil fuel trajectories. These are self-amplifying developments that have the potential to tip the global market. Skills managers are looking for emerging opportunities. These combine to delineate a basin of venture capital attraction. The share of renewables is increasing and might pass through this critical domain deployment increase exponentially. These developments may be considered as transgressions of global tipping points. Now, climate change is anthropogenic. There is scientific consensus on this. Consensus Cook et al. In 16, scientists overwhelmingly agree that humans are causing recent global warming. The consensus of experts is robust across all the studies conducted by co-authors of this correspondence. The 97% consensus derived from abstract ratings is validated by the authors of the paper study who responded to our survey. Our results reject the claim of inconclusive science on climate change and identify the emergence of consensus earlier than previously thought. It independently demonstrates the same level of scientific consensus on AGW as exists for the fact that smoking causes cancer. Higher scientific agreement is associated with higher levels of expertise in climate science. 1/3 of the unconvinced group lack a PhD and only a tiny fraction had a PhD in a climate relevant discipline. Scientific consensus on AGW is robust with a range of 90 to 100%. This is supported by multiple independent studies despite variations in the study timing, definition of consensus, or differences in methodology. Now, anthropogenic global warming causes extinction, but emission cuts saw Costello in 11. Global warming caused by rising GHG emissions will threaten mass populations through infections, heat stress, food and water insecurity, extreme climate events, threats to security, and population migration. It is important not to allow climate catastrophes to deflect us from pragmatic and positive action. Catastrophic scenarios are possible in the long term. We have the tools and resources to bring about the changes needed for climate stability. Human extinction may not be a remote risk. Effects can make the world largely uninhabitable by humans. Hypothermia in humans would occur as dissipation, metabolic heat becomes impossible, making environments uninhabitable. Advantage 2 is climate leadership. Doubling down on Paris commitments is crucial for U.S. diplomatic efforts. It's a key test for Trump, and allies are using it as a litmus test for cooperation broadly. Light in Moscow in 17, the election of Trump suddenly raised doubts about whether the country will continue to play a leadership role. Trump's comments have shown for international climate policies could put the United States at odds with the rest of the world. America should not become a climate isolationist. America's most steadfast allies and trade partners support Paris. The landscape of global diplomacy was forever altered with climate change, breaking out of its historical silo to become an issue central to international diplomacy as trade and security withdrawing risk. Much countries are now assessing each other's contributions as a strong measure of whether they are good partners more broadly. If the Trump administration doesn't honor its commitments, they very well may find it difficult to engage countries on the new administration's priority issue. Leaving Paris would indicate the U.S. is abandoning its place in the international climate regime where other countries will surely step into the vacuum and reap the benefits. The first test of the Trump administration may come soon. Now, decline of the U.S.-led alliance system causes global great power war. Kagan in 17, revisionist. Great powers are not easy. Their sphere of influence is never quite large enough. Their very expansion creates insecurity by frightening neighbors and leading them to band together against the rising power. Granting the revisionist power spheres of influence is not a recipe for peace and tranquility, but rather an invitation to inevitable conflict. For China to gain its desired sphere of influence, the United States will mean that it can close the region off to the United States. Only the United States has the capacity and the unique geographical advantages to provide global security and relative stability. Without a U.S. willingness to maintain the balance, the system will buckle. For the United States to accept a return to spheres of influence would not calm the international waters. It has been a great accomplishment of the U.S.-led world order that this kind of competition has been held in check and great power conflicts have been avoided. Now, a strong U.S.-Europe alliance system is necessary to solve global conflicts. Smith and Rizzo in 17, the United States and Europe will face an array of complex security challenges. On top of that list is the conflict in Syria, which shows no sign of abating, and threats also to the face of both the immediate region and Europe. Russia will be another challenge with its ongoing aggression in Ukraine, ongoing or brewing crises in Libya, Yemen, Afghanistan. North Korea will also test the transatlantic partners. The question is whether Trump will be interested in crafting a new transatlantic agreement addressing some of these concerns about burden sharing, or if he will turn away from the transatlantic relationship. Contention 3 is method. Evaluate the benefits of the plan before our epistemology. Knowledge is always contextual and fractured, which means that specificity is the only way to verify the one he sees truth claims. Focusing debate on our assumptions in the abstract is intellectual hubris and makes managing violence and environmental destruction impossible. Lincoln 14, I prefer progress within the paradigms rather than wars between us. The latter would be inconclusive. This is the age of nuclear weapons. The anthropomorphic climate change transforms the global climate with catastrophic consequences. We need all the help we can get. There is no monopoly on knowledge and no guarantee any one kind with any one epistemology or ontology is always and everywhere more useful to us or otherwise. Is an act of supreme intellectual hubris. Paradigm wars become contests over the truth status of assumptions, declarations that I am a realist for statements of a faith, not conclusions that fall from a falsifiable theory with empirical support. Great debates were academic in the worst sense. Now existence should come first. Wapner in 3, even the most radical postmodernists must acknowledge the distinction between physical existence and non-existence. This acknowledgement of physical existence is crucial. The postmodernists should rightly worry about interpreting nature's expressions, and all of us should be aware of those who claim to speak on nature's behalf. We need not doubt the simple idea that a prerequisite of expression is existence. Prior questions can't be settled. We should act under uncertainty. Cochran in 99, while postmodernist debate continues, still unsure, still unclear about the relationship between discourse and experience, it is important that we proceed with this analysis of the material. This holds for all theorists. Important political concerns hang the balance. We cannot afford to wait for the meta-theoretical questions to be conclusively answered. Those answers may be unavailable, nor do we have questions of which comes first. Meta-theoretical issues or working out practices, the two should be pursued together. Now, climate change should be be understood as a risk, it greatly increases feelings of motivation and agency, Hornsey and Fielding in 16. I'll probably have time for some more cards if you have a couple more. Can focusing on recent progress in reducing carbon emissions improve people's sense of hope and advocacy regarding climate change? Current studies paint a negative picture of the effectiveness of their strategy. Overall hope was overwhelmed and predicted power by negative valence constructs like risk and distress. The message of focus on progress in reducing carbon was effective in increasing hope, but did not translate into increased ratings of efficacy or mitigation motivations. The message of optimism about carbon emissions reduced participants' sense that climate change presented a risk which attenuated the motivation to engage in mitigation. People are motivated to feel controlled, manage their anxiety in the face of a vast and global threat, so as perceptions of risk increase, so too do perceptions of efficacy. This reduction of threat may have had the ironic downstream consequence of suppressing perceptions of efficacy. There is not yet experimental evidence in the climate change literature. The pessimistic messages promote helplessness and withdrawal. Now, approaches that focus on concrete institutional changes instead of producing idealistic visions are empirically more apt at progressive change. Liu in 2013. The purpose of normative political theory to realize progressive political change by formulating coherent, possible, non-normative views about the function and purpose of our social practices and institutions. An interpretation is better if it's able to diagnose the causes. An interpretation cannot perform its rivals if it displays heuristic potential, providing new ways to conceive of the function of social institutions and practices. A dialectical approach helps us make progress by providing a way to judge with theories, or better able to combine principles and agency in an appropriate but politically effective and sustainable way. Drawing on the history of the women's anti-slavery, anti-colonial, and human rights movements, the most effectual political agents were those who tried to subvert specific interpretive patterns from within while continuing to act as the critical voice. Ideal theory approaches try to establish appropriate analysis of normative principles regardless of whether these can meaningfully guide action in the real world. Ideal theoretical approaches generate principles that are indeterminate, irrelevant, or distorting. Ideal approaches fail to contribute to solving problems confronted by agents currently suffering from inadequate political institutions and arrangements. Theorists dismiss the normative relevance of the state and state-based associations for realizing justice. This is unconstructive and detrimental because it fails to recognize the importance of political agency. The disavowal of political membership is unwarranted. Rejecting the normative standing of political communities hardly supports the defense of global distributive principles. It merely draws attention away from some conceptual tools necessary to analyze political transformation. Being disconnected from how political agency takes shape in the world and failing to provide principled guidance should aim to reform particular institutions. A critical theory of global justice should address issues of political agency that render principles politically effective and motivationally sustainable.
Before we begin,
Can I read this last part on the hedge advantage?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. U.S. pursuit of hegemony is inevitable. It's locked in. It's a question of what it looks like. Dorfman in 12. There are 900 bases in 40 countries. There are active personnel in 148 countries. Military dominance and hegemony is taken for granted domestically. Dylan, I lost the card. Never mind. I found it.
Yeah.
Opposition is limited to the margins of supremacy is assumed as a bipartisan. First principle, isolationism is portrayed as intellectually bankrupt. Card is marked as intellectually bankrupt.
And again, I apologize.
No, you're fine.
I just never asked to get on the email chain, and
Oh, sure.
so.
I sent it to the one that the scouts
Are you
sent
not
me.
on the scouting thing?
Oh wait.
I had the same problem last day. I was like,
Oh,
"Man."
I
you're
see.
on the-
I see.
yeah.
Okay. I didn't see that. Friggin' Google. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Alright, ready?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Where does your evidence about the tweets speak to other countries' perception of Trump's rhetoric?
It says that Twitter messages can't be taken as signals of likely future policies, and other countries are looking to whether or not we will uphold Paris. Tweets don't really affirm whether or not we're going to live up to our Paris commitments.
Yeah, but the card is saying we shouldn't take them that seriously, but it doesn't really speak to other countries' investment in that.
I think that our Davenport evidence is pretty good, and it says that other countries are looking towards the U.S. and whether or not we'll uphold Paris. If you have a card
Okay.
that China makes policy based on Trump's tweets, like,
The
I doubt it,
Schellenberger
but
evidence, what metrics of human well-being set the target for acceptable warming at the Paris level?
I'm not sure that Paris set an acceptable level of warming. It just says that we can confine warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Well, yeah,
Not
but
that there's
that
like some sort
number
of acceptable
comes
level.
from some metric of analysis.
Yeah,
I'm
that we
asking
can
what
avoid
is
1.5 degrees. The metric is 1.5 degrees. I'm not sure like what you're asking me.
But I'm asking 1.5 is good, presumably because it allows certain good things for human beings. What are
It
those
allows
things?
certain
What's the
adaptable
metric of
conditions
human
for all
worth
species.
that your evidence
It allows
uses?
for adaptable conditions like avoiding sea level rise, heat stress, food and water insecurity. That's what our Costello evidence is talking about.
What's the connection between climate credibility and the global alliance structure?
Sure. Our Light and Wascow evidence says that it's the foundation for the landscape of global diplomacy. It says that this is a
diplomacy and
litmus test.
alliances are different though, right?
This says that this is a litmus test for whether or not the United States will be an effective partner in our alliances with people like Europe.
Okay, well, where did you get to the alliances? Because all I
A
see
strong
here is
measure of whether they are
diplomacy.
good partners more broadly. That's the one
Okay.
I was just referring to.
The Kagan evidence is talking about Russian revisionism in Ukraine, the Baltic, etc. How does climate cred stop that?
It's about whether or not we have effective climate credibility and thus effective alliances to be able to prevent encroachment in spheres of influence, utilizing partnerships
But
like that with
what
Europe.
about
It's not
climate
necessarily-
credibility means that we
It's
are
not necessarily
able
that
to
climate
counter that?
credibility can prevent Russian aggression, but
Okay,
climate
who
credibility
will
gives us
abandon the
effective
US as a
tools
partner?
to deal with Europe to deal with Russia.
Who will abandon the U.S. as a partner?
Our evidence talks about particularly China, countries in the European
China's
Union.
not currently on our side.
What do you mean they're not on
They're
our side?
frenemies, so that kinda counts.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're
sure.
gonna go with China as a friend.
How can we determine the benefits of the plan's consequences without considering the epistemology of your advantage?
Our Wagner evidence just says that.
Well, I'm asking
says
about
that
the Lake card, not the Wagner card.
Okay, the Lake evidence says that we can consider those things, but we shouldn't only consider those things. The Wagner evidence says that there are significant reasons why
Okay,
we should
so
consider
how do we
physical
strike,
existence in
how do we
terms of.
strike that balance when the Cochrane evidence is like, gotta act?
The Lake evidence, I think, says that we should act if we can identify a clear threat. Our evidence says that
Okay,
acting in the face
so
of uncertainty is
given
okay
the
if there
clarity
can
of
be a
climate
demonstrable
change
threat.
as definitively proven as smoking causing cancer, what's blocking people's motivation in the status quo to react to it?
I don't know, like for individual people, our evidence says the CPP is key, so maybe that.
It's one off. Just one off?
Yeah.
Okay.
You all good? Right. The stabilization of emissions fixes solutions to the climate crisis into an unproven technocratic frame relying on impossible fantasy of homeostasis. This religious ideal of resiliency must be questioned ethically rather than technically boycott, and all tiny concepts have to identify optimal and approach to risk emissions using highly simplified model assuming a reasonable limit the calculation for all kind of uncertainty that would gap policy action would be fixed, target much better on assumption future resource availability. And energy efficiency concepts analysis not by simple answers inherently required value judgment concepts analysis of technocratic agenda focus on emission controls and post question about ethics and analysis written by benefits versus risk culture interpretations must be made rather than trying to solve the problem at the optimal level of climate stabilization. It's particularly appealing because the promise of reward for action taken out this quality looks idea of stability looks to power climate stabilization the American frame for safe secure stable which can be engineered by our action. These stability myths failure product to bring order to our existence. The coalition explicitly draws neither approach climate stabilization becoming a enduring myth even though there are many questions about the framing the problem the accuracy the figures the implication for management assessments of framing should consider alternative framing exactly political debate climate stabilization framing concept focus on data quantification of equilibrium rather than more dynamic goals of decarbonizing energy systems focus on finding a scientific answer to the question of climate policy might be misplaced for broader engagement with ethically the communities benefit from focus on stabilization. The evidence reflects the example theme of climate stabilization policy fabrics is the thing that should be questioned long-term thinking should be an open engagement rather than tied to scientific targets as though we either could or should stand together in command that change in variability seats the level of stabilization target with intensely political and ethical questions privilege consumption safe dangers intolerable system rational based but certain impacts reliable mitigation on really be seen technical technology has been non-least stabilized climate mode rather seen as active and have lively put aside intervention critical ethical dilemmas are obscure clean technocratic activity climate stabilization policies and the CPP depoliticized dominant power structure doing nothing to stop climate change while normalizing the system. Johnson in 15 the CPP's resisted the elation of incremental between 14 existing power structures. It is grossly insufficient to rule lock in the rocks and the greater coal plant derived that has been ongoing snowing. That's about it. The rule so weak as to be penetrate destruction built around the premise that US will extend to commit fracass for decades. The climate direction will be able to submit to fall false fuel infrastructure banks begins immediately. The rule expectation include evidence of fossil fuel energy trumping and clean power. The EPA expects much solar renewable energy and electricity. This is optional to deliver minimum customer pollution. Fossil fuel industrialists have reached the democratic control the extinction will climate policy need to bring about not to stop warming. Won't stop until we stop burning fossil fuels. The combination delay the inevitable, and their focus on eco-pragmatism is unethical and results in an ineffective policy solution. Mob blocking 16. If most pragmatists often about democratic deficit practical solutions are not palatable to the world society's corporate interest control politicians practices the indirect peace seeking have irreparable consequences issues are Russian not examined without geographic core values and choosing basic ethical principles important discussions although time consuming complicated always a value in order to avoid costing mistakes lack of respect for ethical principles undermines policy making ethical deliberation will show not only how it costs but more importantly how and why it just results in an exploitation of wealth extraction is due to powerlessness legally and politically walking outside the political realities more needs to be done because policies go to paper can be rendered used as weak institutions corrupt leaders setting aside important discussions the sacrifice culture identities communal preferences using maturity of the state to expect that matters unacceptable practical practicality, tyrannical, the pragmatic approach to lesson ideal society for people naturally empowered and social not prevail. The common good reduce everything to a matter of practicality, ethical standards, bad choices of social cost, alternative to the pragmatic approach, cast democracy, climate justice requires empowering the peripheries. People will feel accountable for the decision wrong approaches. Is massive inclusion of the decision-making process of participatory democracy. Regards changing of such state-centric mindsets, and the affirmative concedes that the world is laboratory amenable to human calculation. Climate change presents itself as an opportunity for increased ecological surveillances. It only exacerbates climate change, doesn't reduce it to good. In Randall's 9, if rational climate policy may break down the doctrine climate stipulations, policy formulation flawed by the problems of referring back from our idealized temperature target to emissions profile required sensitivity, start carbon cycle dynamics to be knowable. This policy approach exacerbates civic temporary sensitive temperature, the legal precautionary acts to exacerbate the risk of uncertainty. Climate policy to transfer environmental control of stocks become critical and force through monitoring and action protocols because the world's laboratory requiring intelligent target surveillance. It should be possible to determine who and what and who is to blame. Questions of ethics and swept aside by technocratic focus on responsibility and annihilation made but not through institutional preparation, imagination, produce sensitive concerns of policymakers, see tense to think critically, the erotic says no longer is rational subject amenable to rational pleas, but always already an affect to subject climate change events, offer market opportunities for financial products such as catastrophe bonds, imagination for disaster use in, profit for perceived future climate active risk crisis become opportunities to be legitimate by warning the prices to keep market value for climate change policies breaking into being the very reality they seek to avoid the imagination of apocalypse politicize to be exposed to other policies and the delegitimate position governments are anticipating the worst active ways that increase the possibility of its occurrence. Precautionary action may bring back severe climatic consequences rather prevent the solution to climate change become justified as precautionary measures to engaging in uncertain logical projects likely precautionary action climate resulting in except the climate change likely to be high the imagination of a nature on threat of apocalypse eradicates political from debates current debates obscure wide variety of already existing strategies of implications include enforcement and enforcing mortgage control subjection of citizens to full monitoring potential terrorists without charges against the power of climate change. Obscure political debates should take place. There is no legitimate ground to question overpowering assumptions delivering up these apocalyptic scenarios. In the process of organizing political end to protect the environment, re-entrenches human mastery, turning the case through a failed loop, and of attempts at quelling excess. This also results in violence, scapegoating, Bauman, and 15, prevent projects to create balance toward the natural world. The world becomes the standard preserve to create the world of capital, human reach to reach a vicious cycle of circle domination perpetuated by rational science dominating positions, the emerging phenomenon from space, mimetic excess reach becomes the key domination over the natural world. This narrative led to a few mimetic abandonness and human exceptions, and nature becomes the ultimate scapegoat, the launch mastery, attack of attack on the prepared to the Western. The imagination for treating nature standing preserved to create global domination, science contempt to make humans exceptional, participate in this reason was logical order for order on the plane. In the case of science, energy of medic access, must release and balance, modern ideology and armaments, machines, legitimate conflict, open and humanity, scapegoat, confidence, medic, releasing medic access can be understood, climate change and all. It promises us to be the conviction, the acts of our desire to oppose our domination, impose human desired values upon the natural, the fear of nature, creating terror and chaos, the rising with later friend, universal scapegoating, leads to protection of repression of mesis, self is our protection of the external world, the result of fear of the other, time to master dominating rituals and open spaces for medic access towards alternative, the idea that the ground of being is peacefully, the ecological violence, and scapegoating is the defining mode of balance for modern liberal society, is adopting the role of the guardian, U.S. protection of. Okay. And their glorification of U.S. cooperation as the basis for leadership becomes a new theology under the cloak of rhetorical innocence. This sanctions the worst violence in history. Paul, in 15, American self-understanding has been efficient and producing innocent domination, death only pursued as public policy has been cloaked and sacralized in rhetorical innocence, killings, accident, collateral damage. American domination is instant killing, sacrifice, subjugation, ideal remove Native American enslavement, Africans are justified by sacrifices on use that part of the Philippines, World War I, the good work, its acts, the Cold War, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, all starting close sacralizing discourse, violence, no matter how sadistic has been cloaked as defensive religion, has been present to service and rationalization violence in the name of private, some racial, not national terms, narrative into civil religion and rival to Christianity. Empire operates as a corporate power exchange of weapons, cash or sacrificial economy, temporarily constrained economic exchange, violence is redistributed across the body politics, ideological country, domination operates with false incentives, necessity deployed cultural, or for the battles over truth more than territory, American identity, origin of European settlements, settlements against the dominant, promising reaching with indigenous people, murder, war, torture. These are the themes of American history. Native Americans bear sacrificial operations, Sand Creek, Wood, and Ecosh poverty in the name of progress, spiral to Iraq and Abu Ghraib, discourses on racism, remain superficial, long to address religious fundamental foundation, slavery, the war on drugs, exclusion of gays and lesbians, demonstrates real sacrifices, illustrating instant domination, desire to acquire violence, analogy, mimetic, release, operating contagiously to a market system that bear religious significance without appearing to be instant domination, stems from the false transcendence of interrogation, surveillance, torture, practices, military expansion, and weaponry, vote negative to create a radical break from logic, moving towards an ethos of dwelling. That's the only way to generate solutions to the climate crisis painted in more than 16. In a blood space which an implicit opportunity emerges not based on utility concerned with how we come to and be at home in the world time we sing our relationship with the human beings function without conscience about the people thrive not deliver practice and habits of words only concerned we're the most survived standing practice and so the well or can fail the high degree ethos need the theoretical or practical themselves it component of action beyond choice and consensus to assign value accept the opposite of the ethics of finitude offers us the possibility of existing instrumental betterness ethics not about like unique things to exist in their own truth distinct so orientation our daily life needs to become second nature up to everyone is to abandon attitude massive capital discourse should avoid the world picture let's react with facts and make the best case for environmental intensity pressure dominates the ways to make alternative relationships show impossible organization will be less concerned with quantifying impact and more with the one structural relation to the cost of the impact. Proposals engaging NGOs, additionally, specifically the group speak from embeddedness of the ethos not offering no clear number of alternatives, but that's not it's to articulate the conditions with which relational responsiveness emerges. We may study alternative forms of organizing instrumentalism, proliferate up to the point of inflicting all the possibilities of democracy response to the response to make exclude aspects of the existence that have no voice at the stakeholder table. We have important secure its voice in climate change and structured by diversity, ecological citizens is not powerful rationalization to live detached distance. Every individual's node in a dense relational network open to experiencing traveling in ontological understandings of entities, structure, intelligibility, development, knowledge claims they must come first. Thompson. In 5, our understanding of education grounded the history being by giving shape to our understanding what is metaphysics of the most basic presupposition of what is education, ontological, ontology functions like self-fulfilling prophecies, reshaping intelligibility from the ground of our understanding of education made possible by the history of being the metaphysically topic grounded framing, leading us to shift from all beings to mere resources, attentions lacking intrinsic meaning, are simply occupied to build with maximal fiction framing, generates calculative thinking, which like the touch of mind is quantifies all qualitative relations, the limit quantification absorbs all qualitative relations, only which calculative accounts and accounts as being and framing to produce all entities divided by the programmable information which increases the state of pure circulation, our very being in the world, shaped by the knowledge we pursue, uncover and embody. We cannot help practicing what we know here is shared by our guiding metaphysical presuppositions, the university lose sight to share goals to justify the endeavors of the academic community, only disciplines able to produce instrumental useful results found such external sports disciplines present themselves in terms of their use values to adopt this instrumental mentality, come to the education as a means to an increased salary down the road. Fragmentation leads professionally to the university, to irritation, to vocationalism. Our university is becoming an excellent bureaucratic corporation. We are no higher idea of its own. Maximize self-perpetuation, material explanation leads a system in which future dentists of the university can offer nothing more than pragmatic social response to the environment, increasingly transformed with the logic of consumerism. And in fact, ethical interrogations may come first. Totalization of calculated metaphysics is a prerequisite to evaluating their impacts. Hodge and 1 forces beyond human comprehension, control are presented as controllable, generating potentiality for catastrophic global scale competition. The process will be to bring unprecedented disaster that arises further distinction between different kinds of political, metaphysical, political thinking, focus on conception of sameness, ethical, political thinking makes a difference. Central metaphysical construction culminating the emergence of subjectivity, the standard for truth, what culminating the knowledge of human beings who threaten to become relevant distracting the system of technical possibility. Completion of the system requires the ratio of ethical concerns which human beings bring with them to their involvement in metaphysical and technical relations. The future of human beings depends on preserving this, preventing the completion.
What does it mean to create a radical break from logic?
It's a break in logic as it exists now. Our Painter Moreland evidence says that in the status quo, the way we view of the environment is through instrumental rationality predominantly, i.e. that the only motivation.
Like, don't do that?
No, the alternative says that there's ways to motivate people collectively towards responding to the climate crisis.
Could you
based
list some examples of that?
Yeah, so it talks about engagement with NGOs and says that there's an implicit normativity that exists towards the climate and that humans aren't motivated primarily by rational reasons, but instead by affective moves, and that the implicit normativity is a more effective way of generating collective. Specifically talks about the importance of vulnerability and admitting our inability to manage all of this.
That's just like a better way to frame things when we propose things to, like this evidence says, engaging in NGOs, international institutions, etc.
Yeah.
Is to just kind of like call upon some sort of innate feeling we all have about why we should solve
call
the
upon
environment.
an innate feeling. It's to reference the vulnerability that generates relationality and commonality between humans.
Okay,
Between humans.
I'm going to move on. Your evidence says that in the debate about stabilizing emissions, we should consider alternative framings. Why does this mean that we should reject action on climate change if we should just reframe the way that we talk about it?
The alternative doesn't say we should reject action on climate change. It says the AF's action is bad and relies in a metaphysical and ontological worldview that
this is
problematic.
so much. Your Johnson evidence says that the CPP reinscribes the system. What is the system? Is it just this like...
The system of fossil fuel extraction and capitalist exploitation.
Sure. In what way does the CPP reinscribe
Our evidence
that
says
system?
that it places faith
a cap
in.
on
It
those
says that it
companies.
places faith in targets that don't actually do anything to change patterns of consumption and production, but give the illusion of reaching an acceptable level for the economy in order to avoid any confrontation with the need to
what
stop
studies or
fossil fuel
research is this
extraction.
evidence based on in terms of analyzing this?
I don't know the names of the studies, but it says the only way we
why
can
is
solve.
it qualified to
Like I
make
said, I don't know
statements?
the names of the studies. It says it references the amount of GHG that would be reduced by the CPP targets, and says that the only way we can stop climate change is if we end fossil fuel extraction, which the CPP doesn't do. It
That's
places
fine.
faith
Your
in
Degote
existing
and
natural
Randall
gas.
evidence says that policy approaches that act to exacerbate climate change, not reduce it. Is this something that you think is always true, that policy is designed to solve climate change, always recreate
No.
it? Or, okay, what is an example of a climate policy that has not recreated climate policy? It seems like you've made a pretty absolutist claim about
Well,
whether
it's
or
not
not
about
policies
all
can be
climate
successful.
policies. It's about a way of understanding climate policy through the focus on stabilization targets. And so existing climate, so it's hard to answer your question because existing climate policy like Paris, like Kyoto, was all based in there is an acceptable level of climate change and we should do everything to monitor and make sure we're within that target, which is an ineffective and counterproductive way of viewing
so
the
the
problem.
alternative would defend we just keep it all in the ground?
We can keep it all like fossil fuels.
Yeah.
The alternative doesn't take a stance on how many fossil fuels need to go out, but it would say that we shouldn't normalize system of extraction.
Oh, never mind. I will not. Dylan is ready.
Your head's been in a cloud for years.
Okay, we can just go on the K. Just one sheet at a time.
Sounds good.
Okay. The status quo is extinction. Our evidence says unless we solve for warming emissions, it causes mass deaths and die-offs. Our Costello evidence says emissions reductions are the only way to be able to solve, and our Shell and Hoover evidence says that CBP is the only way to get Paris to stay on track. All of their evidence ignores the fact they don't have a single piece of evidence about the Paris Agreement or exactly how the CBP works. Our evidence says that the diplomatic signaling the absence is necessary and sufficient to be able to solve the second advantage. You've conceded that the pursuit of hegemony is inevitable, which means their link argument is fundamentally non-unique. The question is exactly what it looks like. The F makes it net better because it makes a climate regime the focal point for our diplomatic signaling. It also is able to solve for extinction. The Kagan says the revisionist powers in the status quo. Putin is a honey badger, and that will cause aggression to escalate globally unless we were able to have a badass U.S. power. The Kagan evidence says that the U.S. is still able to still have diplomacy to be able to solve for these things, but it's a question of effectiveness. The F is what makes it net more effective. The framework debate on the critique weigh the plan against alternative. One is that it's key to fairness. We are the one to see for a reason we should be allowed to use that against alternative. Second is it's key to topic-specific education. They can run the same case every reading discussion on what I see to garden education. Third is consequentialism. Our F is the best method for impact framing and teach us the way out. So it's a real-world portable skill in existence should come first. That's Wapner. It's a prerequisite to value and nothing, and do it not viewing as an end to itself or neglects the suffering that causes mass deaths. Also, there's always vital life. Kuhn 2001. Frankel describes an existential theory of meaning. 11 Frankel's long-term person contradictory related transcendental states that he experience allows another states to maintain dignity and support by giving others being open to others' life. Always had a meaning for an individual person. Always sat on the face of pursuit tries to self-transcendence mean provides meaning. Individuals gain an increasing understanding of who they are despite that pre-existing a pure experience of pain and extinction destroys all human aspiration. Claims to outweigh destroy vital life. Shell 82 to sum up the worth of our species by referring some to the standard would be able to prepare for our way to extinction because unknown possibilities to develop which extinction would close down only generation of organisms with their own virtue and subordinate their interests and dreams as yet uninformed interest and the dreams of future generations. Also extend the Lou evidence from the 1AC says the way we understand the world is good. It's more empirically able to create change and it's just generally more awesome. Before it cites studies in the real world as opposed to their ambiguous rambling of $2 words. The Lou evidence also says that pure theory causes a vacuous self-searching which might produce some cool ontologies, but it never translates into action. It's also what our like evidence says. Also prior questions can't be settled. Action or uncertainty is necessary. It appeals to skepticism or the efficacy of new technologies don't wholly negate the affirmative action, and our uncertainty is inevitable. And we should do what is best to avoid suffering. That's a piece of Cochrane evidence. Also, there's no cheers for the root cause claims. Yelp is a terrible response to proposed market reforms that are key to solve brand development of the market. Creative problems point to give us a very far response to dangerous and is not a foreseeable future alternative. We cannot afford to reject intervention because they don't meet our ideal conception. When it's satisfied until we should work for reducing the world, we still have to grapple with the world we find ourselves in. Marxists and their refusal to produce the very systems that we should change everything contingent because they refuse to engage in politics or engage in difficult work of assembly actors to render the world impossible. And even if they win a root cause argument from the environment, they don't have the arc for why climate change leadership and things like Russian aggression outweighs any environmental solvency deficit for the F. When they don't solve the second advantage of the F, the tech arguments, they have to have a link to the specific Paris Agreement and what that creates in order to win any of their impact arguments. Shell and Hoover from the 1AC evidence says Paris creates induced innovation that creates a global green universe and can maintain a habitable planet and create necessary conditions for adaptation. None of their evidence assume these things. Also critiquing technological advances or aggressive and doom the environment to catastrophe. It's impossible to solve any environmental problems without applying tech and instrumental rationality. Bronner 2004 critics of the Almighty have correctly emphasized the process of progress. This is not just environmental attempts or like technology. They completely reason that all the justifications for all the interventionist and progressive legislation including the environment technologically is crucial for dealing with ecological devastation seeking to confront the decay them over the day. It's like using an umbrella to defend against a hurricane, and technology can be used without assigning any meaning. Dreyfus 96 technology can treat people whose resources be enhanced without setting meaning give meaning. The Jackson's category appears to attract used by objects in these observations is a system of information. A modern and an object intelligence and flexible and efficient. How passengers are not autonomous subjects for resources recruited in the tourist industry. Heidegger concludes whatever sense in the sense of standing for the longest sense of this object. Also, they say that we cause managerialism. Well, guess what? That's good. We need to have a technological approach in order to prevent extinction. Herberlin 2004. Without fertilizer, we couldn't feed the population. We have more than 50 years to carry capacity to choose non-fossil options that exist. Us have to go like technology. Perhaps we give a picture now. Looks like we have all formed this perspective. We can accept that this technology makes us human technology uniquely identifies as the animal can choose its future. We can live. All of it choose to make a world better for everyone without taking what is available in your personal reach that gives you a way to make a world living take place, makes us what is human, what is right to kind of support numbers, we can make it a better place. We have the unique ability to choose our evolutionary schema with application of power resources. The Chinese were in the same position as the British. We can refine a technological backward station. What can happen is just psychologists, the party supported the tech when the Confucian party can control sectors all over, encourage the technologies that to get incorporated to many better decisions. We can turn our future into something else if we make the wrong choices. Do all of humanity takes the only way to prevent that train wreck without fertilizer. We never the population whether we've got more than 50 years before we exceed the carrying capacity. I think that card's I got copied in twice. So I'm going to mark it at feed the population. Permutation, do both. It solves technological thought as inevitable and it's good. Incorporating the permutation solves the harm of technology. Finnberg 96, technological hero, venture, practical universality, and necessitating for basic technological discourse and control from communication networks and not a destiny to play. Our practical universality is not just a destiny to place in which justice can be worked out the technologies do to the particular realization of the potential conclusion of access to consider the possibility of alternative technology that would integrate the secondary instrumentalization, the more fully concretizations of arguments of the modern or form of technology is established their prize energy, their activity, they should becoming not having the goal is life and not just teamwork, but also their alt is Vegas use a 2AC makes getting adequate ground against their arcane possible. You should reject it. Also, unilateral EPA policy is a key to community structure of Paris. It solves free rating and NDC's it answers our argument as to why this would somehow be bad. Bang it all 2016. The U.S. has a special role in terms of triggering action. The agreement looks excessively reliant on Paris countries. But first, the more complex and more likely actors will emerge as leaders, more critical leaders becomes a predictor and the usually a key actor because of historical responsibilities is vital to the world's power almost and interest in participation. If federal actors should fill them, it's likely affected their parties' incentives. The significant level of public in February when the Supreme Court said the CBP court session and the illustration of fragility of a common policy. The severe role of judicial leaders really might influence the U.S. ability to fulfill its commitment to Paris. Paris relies on the norms and incentives. That's how far away the norms can cheat the card in a second. Phillips and the representatives of basic norms they develop with such it becomes increasingly difficult to the limit of carbon forward setting. Progress may less in the abatement because of major emitters, particularly the world lead might further strengthen corporate norms such as most particularly for transformation of logical consequences and appropriations. Paris become the race to the top. It might also be more later in the possible the United States are unwilling to lead. And unilateral action works at higher. No, that's not the card I want to read. And the efforts keep the climate momentum, Albright 2017 domestic climate change. Actually, the United States has played an essential catalytic role in the international commitments that China and the U.S. have triggered the wave of movements of the countries that some are above CBP as the centerpiece of the CBP and accounts for the large fraction of the United States nations commitments to the state, the clean power, the national women and people in the emissions reduction commitments to the state of the Paris state, without the cast on the ability to achieve domestic emissions reduction. So lots of men who quickly snowball the signal their intention to live in the United States, occupies the expansion of the United States engagement on climate change and beneficial securing a significant movements to the state of the clean power resources, then the United States leadership ability in the international arena. They say the CBP is depoliticizing. No, it's not. No, it's not. The app has already been politicized and it's already gone through things like no one got notice and comment and review. All of those things are reasons why the public was able to be involved in. Second, their unethical argument assumes the states can't follow on. India and China and other LDCs all want the CBP. That's the one they see Davenport evidence they're counting on it. Otherwise, their diplomats are able to say, look at what the United States is doing. Why should we uphold our commitments when they don't uphold theirs? That's a literal quote. And second is the shell and who evidence momentum creates cheaper tech that allows for global diffusion. All their evidence assumes that things like developing countries are able to by the technology. Their evidence doesn't assume things like induced innovation which is able to solve globally. Also, they say the U.S. cooperation is emerging bad. You should prefer our evidence. It's post-Paris and assumes global momentum, not to U.S. action, and others follow on. It's a question. Diplomatic signaling the light evidence says that this is necessary to be able to avoid backtracking on Paris. Also, there's no, they say calculation is bad, but there's no turns consequentialism. It's more than just pure calculation. Or 2005 consequentialism. It's not much for self-feeding consequences. Not dictate whether we should always calculate, but incentivize us to decide whether or not whichever manner will lead to the best outcome. Also, they say also prefer to extend the hoarding and fielding evidence. It says that climate change should be understood as a risk. One is that it's psychologically beneficial. People causes them to have more. It has the cause of the less apathy and things like climate momentum. It also makes them ask what are they able to do, which is able to solve things like the consumer side of their evidence. Is the reason why they say the app is bad. It solves the consumer side. Also, the fact that prediction is imperfect does not mean we should abandon it. Rather, imperfection of the prediction model should lead us to debate where the best predictions. Kurosawa 2004 engaging in random foresight the first half of the skepticism of the value of existences of complete recognition of history than one assertion about capacity of knowledge in the future cannot be known without certainty. Is not about ending the trying to understand and prepare for a crisis. We must be vigilant for signs of disaster. There's a low number of future that creates a destiny nor pure randomness becomes cheaper decision. The president, including trying to anticipate and only manipulating profit motive, solves environmentalism. The status quo environmental movements can only gain singular voices, and positions will always circumvent. For 2016, the environmental movement is obsolete. A call for change after more leaders who no longer have to carry the environmental movement. Before we should redefine environmentalism around the sustainability is profitable class for the recent effects of our keystone environmentalists. The key factor of our keystone was a distraction. Or persistently found other ways to get the production in the market. The impacts on the pipeline on the drop of the bucket. All producers looked at the ways to get the product to market and find out good trace. There has been an important great investment in renewable energy and carbon traces with the big battles or lost the size of the environmental movements continue to suffer blows and capital climate trade. Hands by Bartisans board other waxman. Waxman marquee pass thousands and a quickly called the night filibuster. We're effectively setting up for the go ahead global business with the fights environmental socialism and the environmental movement is environmental degradation for July environmental the form of the latter this year somewhat was finally reached by sell by data sustainability is profitable environmental organization need a new plan of attack EDF strong partners with the McDonald's which come a new case of environmental activism set up polycitrine the EDF set on the McDonald's and sensible questions packaging efficient for given it wasn't packaging environmentally efficient mark the card and environmentally efficient. Also you should forget the concept of being it's a worthless philosophical narrative especially when it causes quietism in the face of real deaths and atrocities. Caputo 93 nothing happens in our being sphere what happens to things that tear to the men what is happening it does not survive all being in sphere mythos super subject the upside of totalizing attempts to describe what is happening what is happening living in front of us and happening to face the worst things to being so many totals and metadata for sake of damage like many bleeding bodies but we will believe that they sphere or men battle on the march, healing itself and making the whole holy, or getting ready for the other beginning of the dead. They're the dead, forgetting there's nothing to remember their history. Also, their alternative fuels anti-environmentalist movements and alien its potential supporters. Lewis 92 is eco extremists and threatening environment, anti-environmental kind of movement. Working radicals call for the total destruction of civilization. I begin to listen to the voices of reactionist radicalism, deep oppositional anti-ecological forces against more fighting, period actions, completely reform environmentalism is or still used because of correcting short-term citizens postpones necessary reconstructing the insanity of machine, other than even closer to destruction in order to save in the future, shortly repair. And their alt doesn't solve their impacts, just makes things worse. Last year, 2012, historically, it was not humanism to give right to radical, and it was specifically anti-humanism. A socialist community became established the rejection of humanist intervention, not accept a specific value to human must not forget the humanism's alternatives and other principles. The difference are the commonality, the point to be even worse. Caribbean planners emphasize multiplicity of human species, the absence of any use for human nature, the irreversibility of the result on a notion of fundamental commonality. Mark that part, commonality.
Okay. The piece of evidence that you read in the 1AC that says pursuit of the Gemini's locked in says that both Democrats and Republicans believe in massive deployments and that the United States has a massive military now. Why does that mean that the natural recourse to any society is interventionism?
I don't think it's that it is interventionism. I think the argument that evidence is making is that we will always want to be some kind of global power. The question we say is that it's now a question of whether or not that is diplomacy or things like military intervention. The light evidence says we can still work with countries in like the EU.
So this evidence says, so it doesn't say that we'll always try and be a military power. It says there's 900 bases in 40
it says
countries.
there's tons of bases all
active
over the country.
personnel in 148 countries. And then it says that the Republican Party has veered into belligerent unilateralism. It isn't just Republicans. Massive troop deployments continue.
I don't understand where you're going with this question. We have read evidence it's like the United States will always pursue hegemony. It's a question of form. We've read evidence that now is unique for it to be able to like
but
apply
your
movement
evidence
to build.
doesn't say they'll always pursue power. It says
That's why they would send forward deployed troops. Like why do you think they're there?
The piece of Kuhn's evidence says that life has value because people can decide how they want to face adversity. The Shell evidence says that extinction matters because of future generations. Why should we care about future generations if they don't have life yet?
I'm unsure why you talked about the Kuhn's evidence, but the Shell evidence is about the extinction of all life being bad because it's the destruction of all future aspirations. When we say future aspirations are good.
The word it gives about why it's uniquely unethical is that future generations will never be born into existence. The only account of value you've introduced is that once someone is alive, it's up to them to determine whether or not they want to die.
The Kuhn's evidence just says that there's always a value to life, which I think is also, it kind of goes in tandem with the Shell evidence. There's always value to life. We should also protect future possibility of life.
Okay, how does your no root cause argument square with your 1EC evidence that says that the reason that there has been historic peace can be isolated to one variable, U.S. military power?
I don't think that's what the evidence says. Kagan evidence just says that the United States having a more robust alliance system is necessary to block revisionist powers. Also, it's different. Also, the Cochrane evidence is talking about when we go into philosophy, those kinds of prior questions, not questions of if hegemony can solve a conflict.
You don't think it's an erasure of proximate causes to say that every military conflict in every region and all of the geopolitical factors can be reduced to U.S. military?
I missed the beginning of this question.
You don't think it's an erasure of proximate causality to say that all complex geopolitical negotiations?
I don't think we've made that claim. I think you're putting words in the 1AC.
That's what Kagan thinks.
Okay, good for Kagan. We've read a piece of evidence that's revisionist powers are really blocked by a more powerful United States alliance system. We've read evidence that we also have an alliance system.
The piece of evidence about managerialism isn't really about the relationship that we should have to the environment, but it just says that
kind of is. We got to feed the population by using the environment, by managing it in different ways. Pesticides are a form of managing the environment.
Okay.
Am I wrong?
We'll start there.
want to start on framework, and the impact of review stuff that was at the top will be addressed in the 1R, because the part is going to talk about the cases.
Extend the Thompson evidence. Ontological understandings are a prerequisite to evaluating the plan because they function like the Midas touch, infecting and undergirding all knowledge claims and value judgments which they come into contact with. This all requires that we presuppose the basic interpretations of entities and the reality in which they interact. Fundamentally, human beings must be rational calculators in order for the market adjustments to produce a shift away from fossil fuels. Carbon must be something that we can measure and calculate in order to create the ideal climate which is stable and safe for human existence. This means that all of these undergird to the same bottom foundational logic of calculation in Western metaphysics. This makes the permutation impossible. The link argument only requires that we demonstrate that they have accepted the calculative metaphysics of modernity. This will structure our notion of education into a skills maximization scheme that can only serve the further efficiency of markets. This turns all their arguments about the benefits of the game, and it affects how you evaluate solvency, because ontological commitments affect implementation of policies, how we will be able to relate to other modes of politics that become ontologically illegible, to a calculative method of solvency that demands all actions must address the problem in one fell swoop from the view from nowhere. There is no room in this for a questioning of neoliberal post-history or alternative ways of being which are a priori ruled out. The only critical task for the academic can be to generate disruptions that inject anxiety into this worldview. This is Curtis 13. Analysis limited debates over best policy with the emphasis that ontological game to the world itself. This mode of information sits well with all the neoliberal markets of individuality towards community gives rise to significant averted knowledge and democracy. Teaching is stable to satisfy the students and customers. The university has a major role in maintaining cultural status quo, policing knowledge, but also social production that sets the narrative neoliberal post-history can clip right for weapons until because under revised economic political assertion by others supports the story is not because that is the truth. The world is contestable. Students remain interested in the big question and an important role can still be played by the university that opens up states for contestation of challenging the world, for offering radically alternative ways of living and being with others. A meaningful totality of color worlds have right and structure revealed to be inadequate. The humanity makes the loss of an established truth in a time of crisis to enable anxiety to work in the name of alternative vision, which is why the humanities are under such attack, and then the marketized model of public role of the university should be to ensure anxiety, questioning neoliberal post-history, and therein framing of politics as a series of calculative adjustments ontologically regulates human agency such that it is only ever a drive towards normalization. This breeds passivity and inaction, which ensures that the climate crisis becomes inevitable. Hamilton 16. Why has political action proven absent? The answer lies in the essence of Western subjectivist metaphysics, the very place ultimately technological, manipulable, predictable, order quantified, and always directed towards furthering something else. If political action emerges from the confluence of unique individuals in a distinct place in a world of framing, democratic, uniform, subjective, metaphysical boundaries of thought expressed in predetermined calculative thinking, then the two are inherently antithetical. Any potential for unpredictable action will be abound in order to regulate it within objectification. Once nature has been framed and revealed only as a report of itself, identified through calculation, any distinct unique spaces, places, and things will become concealed by the uniformity of objective mathematical calculation. Metaphysical uniformity normalizes behavior by ordering and diluting the uniqueness of human thought. Orderability balances subsumed political discourse, debating the potential for creative unbounded action. The political paradox presented by climate change, the production of more scientific knowledge confirming its unequivocal existence, has actually yielded less political action. This also affects the impact calculus debate. The Hodge evidence is the final card I'm going to extend here. It's a better claim about individual ethnics than the Wapner card because it says that existence is not given a priori value but occurs through relationality that challenges a total perspective of an individual. this outweighs the extinction scenarios because planetary destruction becomes possible only in the 20th century's God's eye view of the planet used by both nuclear planners and climate scientists to subordinate all difference under a single view of the energy systems that connect all of us. The disruptions to these automatically become a threat to the possibility of total technicity and must be purged through violence. Only centering ontological difference can reopen ethics beyond human mastery to prevent the variety of scenarios for destruction that converge in the 21st century way beyond individual control of governments or markets. I'm going to finish that evidence here. The full actualization of metaphysical state of technical nature, there are concealed ethical conditions of possibility for metaphysical destruction. Logic of actualizing metaphysics technology applies to the elimination of human beings, a retrieval ethic, originally in a metaphysical question and attempts to set up a view which is not specific to human beings. Heidegger reveals the spectral ethical dimension of metaphysical construction. He performs and reveals our ethical need. They say fairness, it's arbitrary and self-serving. Don't allow the aft to determine what is the basis for negative offense. They haven't determined why it's unfair for us to debate about justifications. It is educational for the topic. We are engaging with all of the scientists that set the targets for CO2 and asking whether it is ethical. You have to consider justifications to make a judgment on the plan because it's the worldview that leads you to the conclusion of the text. The Kissinger and the pacifists who wanted us out of Afghanistan. The entire debate to be had is what worldview leads you to that conclusion. Preferring consequences is illogical. The K is a prior consideration to what constitutes a consequence and how we can know whether or not one is going to occur. Value to life inevitable reduces people to individualized discrete objects that propagates a solipsist conception of value wherein as long as people have the ability to dream, eat, and exist, they are valuable to us. This means that they are available for exploitation because they have their own ability to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and take care of their own issues. The question of value that is posed in the Painter-Moreland evidence is a question of relationality and connection. This is only achieved through the refusal of their logic of victimization that creates people as objects of management to be saved through a retention of the power to kill. Croker 14. State-administered sacrificial violence to the death of the individual doubled a new violence aimed at terminating life as well as limited the ability of individuals to die their own death. Power applies to alienate the meaning of both life and death. Those targeted events for reduction of state and not being the politics can every liberal democratic state suppose a new life form on the global political economy. The suffering logic requires suppression of politics in the streets, all the disavowal of those bodies so identified supremely to organic growth who lives and died on strict reduction of those bodies denied recognition of super beings, followed signs immediately become reserved objects so they can resist fast and abuse followed rendered invisible by ethical indifference. They say extinction first fails to consider the root causes of these and the multiple scenarios. That was the Hodge evidence. The alternative does lead to action. The Painter-Moreland evidence is much better than their cards from the 90s that reject ontological questioning. This is an argument about implicit normativity as a motivation for engaging institutions. This is how human beings operate in their dwelling, not through abstract demands justified by external institutions or rational values like calculation, which means the 1AC is actually counterproductive for motivating action because it doesn't speak to how we live but assumes an impossible position of literally magical control over the government. It's important to relinquish that, to force confrontation with the fundamental anxiety and powerlessness that unites all human beings. This is the only way to open a vulnerable and humble relationality to the difference of others, which brings pluriversal coalitions and political movements towards sustainability that is attuned to difference. The fantasy of deliberative democracy present in the permutation simultaneously incorporates and suppresses all viewpoints under a single epistemological view of the climate crisis through science and market responses. This business case for environmental responsibility adjusts the method of management but upholds Western mastery, which ensures the recurrence of impacts and totally blocks out alternative political viewpoints. You should instead ally your ballot with abundant social transformations that are already present outside of the Western worldview. Collard 15, the Anthropocene is sparked that will light the time to dream about better futures. The colonists are rebuilt from scholarship and remove premise on self-determination. Colonialism is the only distraction needed to transform these conditions require political circle ground and colonists and concrete political strategy create condition for abundance to recall violence is central. Understanding your vision today is linked to our of pure ruination. We need to pay attention to history. We ally ourselves with Ethiopian advocates for farmers' rights to be a connoisseur over 200,000 members defended the collective rights of our accredited institutional life beyond national board reality with other fronts that have capacity to act in pluralistic ways. Creating abundant futures means supporting already existing world-leading practice akin to wide indigenous movement spread like wildfire. Advocates applies engaged to activism wherever one lives. Unsettling already taking place universally the best chance for abundant socio-ecological futures. They say that we must act. This requires the ignoring the other political possibilities consequences or the risks of our action. They say, don't roll back technology. This isn't offense. You already read the card here. Dreyfus proves that Heidegger doesn't reject technology. It's just about whether it's submitted to a fantasy of mastery of human. The Honeybee Network and Kerala model prove that there are indigenous ways of engaging with technology that aren't about total control, which means it's a better form of managerialism. Technological thought's not inevitable, only true if you take on an essentialized notion of human nature that ignores history and other cultures. No link or impact to vagueness, and Cross-X checks it. Unilateralism is not true for Trump. Your card is optimistic and naive, doesn't tune to the history of violence that will be articulated in the 1 and R on the Paul card. They say that you have to manipulate the profit motive. They've conceded. I'm going to take some prep for process.
So you read this piece of Kroger evidence. It seems to say that liberal democracies are bad. What does the alternative do to like change liberal democracy?
The card does not say liberal democracy is
It does. It talks about why liberal democracy is bad because it like homogenizes different voices. I want to know what you do to either change liberal democracies or how the dwelling stops it.
The alternatives is an ontological disruption in the worldview of Western metaphysics. Okay.
That
like essentially
like
means
these
that
three dudes from thinking one way. I want to know why that spills over into some kind of change.
Well, it's an ethical, and the ethical stance that the alternative calls for does not require the hollowing out of existing political institutions or the development of new ones.
Why does the AF
It's to
necessitate a
suggest
hollowing
that
out of political institutions?
The AF?
Yeah.
That's not my claim.
Okay, then that doesn't seem like a net benefit for the alternative. I just want to know, I want to know what the alternative relationship is to liberal democracies. You seem to have evidence that it's bad.
We would say that liberal democracies must be accountable for differences in their polities, which are not merely like cultural or political, but ontological.
Okay,
and that happens through a disruption in questions over the nature of value, questions over the nature of.
Can you just make this more material? Like what communities? Like,
so, like for instance, you have said that the target that you have set requires the world to be available for human existence based on economic exchange and
I mean that's not entirely true. The 2-degree limit is also like it stops certain islands from sinking and it stops other
that's true. But this is exactly the problem with the
existence of life.
This is exactly what the Croker evidence says is the liberal state, the guardian function that it serves, reduces these people's political worldviews or demands to simple biological existence. Yes or no.
Okay.
Are they
I don't understand how the alternative changes that calculation, but I'm going to move on. You've read this card about social transformations that are happening now. This card's about like some Ethiopian farmers. What relevance does this have for the United States and how like you've said we should like relate to our communities.
This is exactly our link argument is that the Western planners of climate policy believe they can completely de-link from the political alternatives being articulated in places like Ethiopia and Brazil.
This just doesn't seem to get at my question, which is
it is relevant because all human beings.
No, it's not because you've tagged this card as like a social movement that they should be in solidarity with that will work to solve a kind of like larger issue. It doesn't seem like this is happening in the United States. What like movement or coalition can you point to in the United States that would also cure this
claim that we are de-linked from that is exactly what we are.
I guess I don't know what you mean by de-linked then. Can you like explain that for me?
Okay, so we occupy the same Earth as these people and pollute it in a way that is fundamentally
global. Then why should we not be held responsible? It seems like the AF holds us responsible.
Our argument is that we have to be responsible. Then the affirmative fails to do so.
I feel like we're saying like similar things. You're just saying bigger words than me. Like I don't know why the AF is bad.
We're not. Your claim is that we can create the stable environment through management based on market institutions and Western governments. Our argument is that those are ontologically opposed to the existence of decolonizing alternative political possibilities.
You all good?
They say we have to rely on profit motive. They have considered the 1 NCK of eco-pragmatism, robotic evidence. 1, expediency focus erases any account of ethical principles. Although our evidence indicates that discussion is important and may be time-consuming, their argument results in tunnel vision that sidestep the question of what brought us to the system. It ensures that we're always confronted with the immediate crisis, which always crop up. There'll never be a time for the question of ethics because the system ensures that crises always arise in order to distract us. The second is that it ensures our policy making is corrupted because it always has to be made legible to dominant interests. For example, if corporations control power in the status quo, then we always have to reduce any ethical value to the question of how we can make it profitable. What if there really is a conflict with profit motives and the sustainability of our system? It ensures that we can never ask the question of whether we have to take a pause from that. Ensures that we are always locked in because we always have to do what persuades people in power. Our evidence indicates that it's fundamentally unethical, and the only way that you can create alternative forms of resistance is if you make a pause in the system and take a break from it. There's also no link to their eco-fascism argument because it's now the alternative. Now, the permutation, hold the line. There are DAs on DAs that are dropped into 2AC. This should be their last chance because all of our offensive block is predicated on their concessions of these. The first is our boycott argument. The affirmative's elevation of tipping point to the technocratic fantasy rooted in a quasi-religious obsession with stability, order, and management. They seduce you with an imaginary of a future, safe, secure world that's purged of any climate disaster. Every time the affirmative talks about the need for stabilization, the urgent threat for immediate action, you should remember it was not the coastal island states or poor people in southern India faced with the threat of monsoons, or even the Inuit whose ecosystems are destroyed in the Arctic that set the tipping point at 2 degrees. Economists obsessed with efficiency and Pareto optimality determine the stabilization point as one by which costs can rationally, the benefit can be economically calculated to exceed the cost, which rationally and necessarily excludes ethics. The affirmative's false belief in the objectivity of their economic depoliticizes critical thinking about climate change in favor of technocratic thinking. This means that including the affirmative with the alternative corrupts the ability for the alternative to solve. In the permutation fails, our boycott evidence says that technocratic considerations need to be abandoned, not supplemented. Any inclusion of the app means that the alternative cannot generate genuine relationality or make a move towards vulnerability. This is contextualized in the CPP with our Johnson evidence. The point isn't that the app doesn't solve climate change, but it begs the question of what climate change means and how we determine what climate change is. When climate change is mentioned only in terms of economic planners, then CPP in Paris can be viewed as a success because the targets that are set stabilize the amount of climate change that they want. It's all set at a 2-degree limit. However, this relies on adjusting the targets so that the overall system of fossil fuel extraction can stay in place, and that even though we meet our targets, we only do that by shifting from coal to natural gas rather than ending fossil fuels independently. The affirmative forces you to subscribe to a godlike view of climate change in which global carbon budgets can be managed and allocated. This is directly at odds with the possibility of vulnerability, relationality, and embeddedness, which means that the permutation fails. This also should make you highly skeptical of your ability to be the manager of a resilient science, and it only confirms what anyone who looked at the history of environmental management would realize. CFCs were initially thought to be environmentally friendly and were put into mass production rapidly. It was only later we realized they were a prime contributor to ozone. After that, we shifted to HFCs, and HFCs now become both a threat to the ozone and climate change. Clean coal production blows the top off mountains and displaces tons of people, destroying water. Every nuclear power disaster has been an attempt to switch to more efficient fuels. Your ability to manage and determine what the acceptable level of climate change should be inherently skeptical. It also means that the risk of a turns case argument outweighs any belief you should have in affirmative solvency. Second is the mimesis DA. The affirmative provides the basis for a violent project of ritualistic scapegoating. They've considered a fundamental theory of rivalry in international politics that filters out their arguments. All of their arguments. Is fundamentally designed by, shaped by mimetic desire, i.e., the desire to have what the other has. Makes rivalry an inevitable condition of politics, which makes rituals of scapegoating inevitable because the only way that rivalry is suppressed is by solidifying a common humanity. Our evidence says that this applies to the way we treat climate change because it creates the idea of a common humanity that can come together and maintain mastery over the nature. It's a way of solidifying a new place. The Paris Agreement is demonstrative of this because it was framed under the desire for a new coming together of the human species to suppress previous rivalries. It's also an impact turn to their cooperation advantage because it believes that power can be suppressed via cooperation and ignores the violent tendencies of attempts to gain power. The impact is twofold. One, the scapegoating of those that don't participate in our carbon measure will do forced sanctions, economic judgment, other violence because they embody a threat to the common humanity that's established. Second is that we scapegoat the environment. This argument is conceded and turns the entire app. It's the thing that ties us to our finitude, our inability to be truly masterful. We lash out to show our ability to be infinite in spite of its ecological limits. This causes environmental destruction in the most virulent forms. Think of the burning of Iraqi oil fields, the spreading of ecocidal pesticides in Vietnam are all indicative of this, of when our own relation to the violent environment becomes intentionally violent. Now, the good and rangeful evidence about rationality was the next DA that was dropped into 2AC. Environmental measures are couched in setting a target for accessible limits of climate change and then avoiding them. Our evidence indicates that this is bad for a number of reasons. First, global surveillance. The attempt to stabilize as a limit means we are obsessed with environmental surveillance. How much are poor third world countries polluting? Is it within our target? We turn it into a budget that must be calculated. The impact is we do things like economic adjustment, sanctions, subsidies that create massive violence. The WTO is indicative of this. When third world countries didn't get along with our global regime for economics, they were massively destroyed. Second, it makes global warming inevitable. It depoliticizes effective solutions and causes a rush to short-term things like geoengineering where we don't know the consequences. This makes accidental climate catastrophe more likely than Tweety read the best links for this argument. Our argument wasn't that the app failed at generating Paris, but Paris itself was a bad move because it relied on the idea of climate targets. They secure the coherence of that. Finally, the American theology, DA, also a DH, is a permutation. Duality is part and parcel with the larger history of American death dealing justified through the sacralizing aura of rhetorical violence. This can be seen in their very frame that U.S. military presence is inevitable globally. The only question is whether we can do it ethically or not. The ethical cover of U.S. military power is its most dangerous form, not when it's benign. The most intense forms of American domination have been justified through this benevolence. The empire in the Philippines, World War I, the war against Asia, the Cold War, Korea, Vietnam, all share the rhetorical gesture of we don't want to be interventionists, but we have to. They've conceded that it results in the most sacrificial, the most intense forms of violence like torture, Abu Ghraib, etc., which means they don't get an account of the jet.
safer for everybody. Oh yeah, JCC only building too. Yeah, I like this new person I have already. Which was like the part of KC, like not the strip mall part of KC.
Right.
Okay, is everyone ready? Okay. Extinction is coming out of the status quo. The cost of evidence says that warming will cause things like sea level rise and lack of adaptation to heat stress, and also cause food and water insecurity. But the CPP solves it at least to a diplomatic signal that gets other countries on board. You should frame this to be in terms of whether or not you should make perfect the enemy of the good. As long as we win that the CPP solves global warming, then there is an existential risk associated with voting negative, which means that if we win our framing arguments, you should vote out. Even if they win the link argument, the framework debate ontological focus is bad. It shouldn't be considered a prerequisite. Forget being it's a worthless narrative that justifies endless theoretical pursuits without producing real world action on suffering. That's the Caputo evidence. There's no answer to this argument in the block that turns all other ethical obligation arguments. It justifies atrocities in order for us to fix our orientation towards it. It also leads to quietism in the face of understanding the super subject, which is calcing ontology 50 times in the face of mass extinction. Now we should obviously get permutations. We can adopt an approach to environmentalism that counts for their impacts. If we win that, then we should win the permutation. Their current evidence that we don't require you to forget ways of being, just that you should compete with the affirmative. That doesn't exclude considering alternative ways of being. Their breeds passivity argument. They have solves that the Horthy and Fielding evidence says that comprehensive psychological studies show that talking about warming as a scientific and existential threat increases people's feelings of agency, which literally answers 100% of their link arguments about depoliticization. That's the one you see Horthy and Fielding evidence. Now there are no root cause arguments. The Bryant evidence says that there are existing technologies that can solve global warming, and we shouldn't waste time thinking about whether or not those are ethically justifiable. If we have reasons why we should implement them, that is an ethical reason to implement them. Now fairness, their justifications aren't a reason to reject the F. Yes, we should consider justifications, but the link evidence says that we shouldn't solely focus our debate on these arguments. If predictions are imperfect, we should debate about it. The link evidence says that knowledge is always fractured. It's impossible to come to a certain conclusion, which means that we should debate in the face of uncertainty about strategies to resolve existential threats like global warming, not abandon those discussions just so we can talk about their justifications. That doesn't preclude action on them. Now the value to life argument, the Kuntz evidence says that there's always value to life, which means that there's no justification for inaction on climate change because physical existence is a prerequisite to expression, which means that our app is a prerequisite to whether or not we can even talk about these things in the first place. Now the next argument I'm extending is the Albright evidence that Dylan read in the tweet that the app is key to momentum on climate change, which means that even if they're right about other things like geoengineering, the affirmative is necessary to create better forms of environmental technology that would resolve any reason why we would need to use geoengineering. The app is also not geoengineering, so I don't think they should get a link argument about this. All of our link arguments are about why the CPP is fundamentally different than any solution that we've considered on climate change in the past. Now their next argument is that markets and profit motives erases all of our ethical principles, but markets are sufficient and necessary to solve global warming. The fertility evidence says that we can utilize profit motives to solve incremental gains. Just because the markets haven't been justifiable in the past or have acted unethically in the past isn't a reason to give up on them. It's a reason why we can double down and utilize their efficiency motives to resolve things like global warming. The Kurosawa evidence says that even if this is imperfect, it's not a reason to abandon it. Their link arguments criticize total uncertainty, not risk. The Fitzsimmons evidence says that while knowing nothing does make planning impossible, we can and should make determinations under conditions of risk to create tailored solutions. The Kurosawa evidence says that assuming the future is entirely unknowable presumes that our current actions don't shape future conditions, which is the same type of ignorant opacity that they are talking about. If predictions are imperfect, then we should debate about them, not abandon them. Skepticism makes scenario planning more effective by ensuring that solutions address multiple possibilities. Now the permutation. The first dissat is the managerialism argument. We are impact turning. This managerialism is necessary to solve the environment. The Feinberg evidence says that technological thought is inevitable and we should use it. Fear of technology is just a gut reaction to its potential. We can use that potential to establish technical choices to improve daily life without universally endorsing all of its implications. Now, it also doesn't turn the case because managing nature doesn't devalue anything. Democracy and humans are not a finished product. We must evolve beyond natural limits. The defiance of nature has led us to increase our quality of life. Nature has committed countless crimes against humanity, plagues and diseases, earthquakes, past age, and nature has created us suffering and die. The human condition should still play what nature intended. When we win the battle against nature, we will not be humans anymore. We will be better than humans. We will have a world of opportunities to upgrade ourselves using genetics, cybernetics, and nanotechnology. The Bryant evidence also says that technology is necessary to solve the environment. Withdrawing from nature doesn't mean that global warming goes away. The best way to hold ourselves accountable for the issues of global warming is to do things like the Clean Power Plan, not talk about how we have failed nature in the past. Instead, we should double down on the things that human beings can do to resolve global warming. All of their examples don't mean that we should give up. They're just reasons why we create a bad policy in the past that fits in man's, and the current solid evidence says that that is a reason why we should try new policies, not give up on them entirely. Their second dissad, the mimesis dissad, we are impact turning this to the idea of a common humanity is necessary. The lesser evidence says that anti-humanism is what scapegoats difference because it allows us to justify actions based on what we perceive as inherent or intrinsic differences, and then do things like exterminate populations because of that difference. Rather, we should orient ourselves around a common humanity because that provides motivation for not treating people like shit. Now, their last argument is the rationality dissad. All of their examples are reasons why past policies have failed. The CPP in Paris are different. They are not sanctions on third world countries, but a fund of capital to utilize to resolve global warming. You should frame the link debate like this. They might have reasons why things like the Montreal Protocol wasn't enough, or reasons why the Clean Power Plan might not be enough, but none of these are reasons to reject the affirmative as long as we are winning reasons why our thought and our justifications are good for the environment. Now, they say that we cause the worst form of violence, but the act is not instrumentalization or interventionism. The linked evidence and the linked evidence from the 1AC says that the act creates a new form of diplomacy where our ideas about global cooperation are no longer centered about whether or not we have to intervene in places like the Middle East, but whether or not we can create adaptive solutions to global warming. That type of cooperation is especially important to the era of Trump because he will roll back our attempts to do it in other realms, which means that the more we can double down on it, the better. Anything else?
Just the last card.
Oh. Also, the alternative alone fails, which means that only incorporating tech thought solves consumption-only focus fails because it ignores production-oriented environmental degradation. Holmes and 7 consumption. We have to be clear that alone will not be enough to solve the crisis. It cannot be the main strategy of the movement. It will divert energy away from the underlying systemic dynamic that is driving degradation. What is all too often overlooked in such calls for transformation is the global treadmill of production.
The converging crises of the 21st century share a common root. Our Hodge evidence has been dropped. It says that the construction of a world view based on the God's eye perspective is the prerequisite for planetary destruction because we believe we have a singular mastery over energy systems and political economy that can be resolved through calculative adjustments based in international institutions from the perspective of the West. This is only possible through an erasure of difference that makes that must rule out any alternative ways of viewing the climate crisis before it can create a total agreement like Paris in order to resolve this. This, however, is the root cause of all atrocities. The Croker evidence says it can only be secured through alienating the relational and pluriversal meanings of life and death that exist across the human species. This means that there is no ethical importance to individual world perspectives and cultures, but a simple baseline biological value that is ascribed across the entire species and is determined through the binary logic of save or protect, exist or die. The only way to resolve this is to view a fundamental vulnerability and anxiety that we have about our own powerlessness, the limits of our own knowledge and control over the world. This creates value and makes existence meaningful through relations, which is not, in fact, inevitable, but is disappeared in a world of alienation and technical mastery because people become objects that can be created, reproduced, and disposed at will. This is the root cause of every extinction scenario, nuclear war, climate level pollution, artificial intelligence technology, and biotechnology are all rooted in the belief that we can control and manage human beings like objects in a market system. This is the only way, the alternative is the only way to solve the root of these scenarios, otherwise one will inevitably crop up, which we are going to learn on the permutation. They say that we have to forget being. This misunderstands our alternative. This is what I said in the block when I said that their cards from the 90s are not answering the right alt. Our card is a rereading of Heidegger's arguments about dwelling and affectivity as a form of implicit normativity that is not wedded to an absolute ontology but disrupts it in the Western worldview by demonstrating that all cultures have an interpretation of being, but the risk is when one becomes hegemonic. This is why we frame it as an act of disruption. There's no impact to this argument that's explained. Framework. They have conceded the Thompson evidence. Ontological interrogation is prior to the assessment of truth claims or value judgments, which means that we are logically a prior consideration before you can evaluate the plan. You wouldn't vote for the withdrawal of Afghanistan based on a pacifist worldview if you could inadvertently be supporting Kissinger, which is why you should prioritize our ethical injunction before the sameness of the binary decision on whether to endorse the plan text. This is the only way to motivate pluriversal responses to the climate crisis from a variety of cultures. The Hamilton evidence says that they box out indigenous people and others who don't want to work with the market or understand the climate crisis through Western science. They have read a psychological study, but the question is, who do they motivate? Western liberals who have no incentive to radically destabilize their own comfort and move away from a carbonized economy. We are able to talk about climate as a problem, which solves all of their offense on why the AF needs to be represented, which means that you should prefer our ethical response to it rather than a technocratic one. There's no terminal impact to fairness. It's arbitrary and self-serving to let the AF determine the level of negative offense. Only debate about justifications produces valuable education. That was the 2NC. They say that markets are key to solve prevent any understanding of a conflict that happens outside of resources. The card from Mabalik about environmental pragmatism was dropped. It says that we always view ethics as the consideration to be taken on later because it is too costly and time-consuming, which also means that all policies become counterproductive because we ignore the fact that they are existing within a corrupt institution that is based only on the maximization of efficiency and profit, creates terminal lock-in to the status quo, which means that there will be rebounds in efficiency gains that ensure further resource consumption and makes their impacts inevitable. They say predictions work. We have disputed your specific ones about the targets that will be on the permutation. They say tech and management are good. We do it better. That was your Dreyfus card. They say the alternative can't act. You don't get rid of the treadmill of consumption and production that the 1AR card said is the root cause of all of this. Only the movements outlined in the Collard evidence are challenging capitalist extraction regimes, which is what is necessary to get away from global pollution. The permutation proper, they shouldn't be able to win this. Our argument is that the link is based on a ontological commitment that they have made prior to the plan text, which means it's not a question of whether or not we have negated their policy. However, they have not even defended it. The Johnson evidence is basically dropped. It
says that technocratic adjustments like the CPP try to measure a target that safeguards the industry so that it can shift to new forms of extraction, like natural gas, makes all their impacts inevitable, and means that technocratic adjustments are mutually exclusive with deeper ethical questions about whether or not there is a religious fantasy of growth and limitless exploitation that demands an ethical injunction. This means the alternative must stand alone. The next is the mimesis scapegoating argument. You've conceded it causes violence against the environment. Common humanity can never be secured. The slippages cause things like Agent Orange and the burning of Iraqi oil fields, which causes more pollution. The targets K, DeGode and Randall's evidence is offense. It causes surveillance and sanctions for those who don't solidify within our climate regime that prevent changing social patterns of consumption and alienate people from compliance with the regime. It also means that we have to do anything to meet the target, which means that we have to act short-term. Rush to action causes geoengineering that makes the climate worse. History from the 1NR.CFCs proves you should default to skepticism.
Extinction is a status quo and you should give a shit. One is that warming causes extinction. Our Costello evidence says that emissions reduction targets are the only way to solve. Our Shell and Hoover evidence says that we cause induced innovation, which is necessary to be able to solve global warming, but also creates the necessary conditions for us to be able to solve adaptation, which means even if our targets aren't perfect, which might be the conclusion of some of their 2NC evidence, it means we are able to solve long-term causes that cause mass die-offs. The second is our Kagan evidence says that the revisionist powers are becoming honey badgers of the status quo and they will challenge U.S. power. Our evidence says that U.S. alliances are necessary to be able to solve for the worst kinds of intervention and extinction from great power, where they have no reasons why their alternative is able either overcome the things like the challenges of hegemony and the status quo, nor do they have an answer to the pursuit of hegemony being better inevitable, which means it's just a question of what it looks like. Their military interventions in a world in which diplomatic signaling no longer works. You should hold the line on this argument in the 2EC 1AR was in. Cross-ex arguments are, and our argument is that diplomatic signaling is necessary and sufficient to be able to solve the worst forms of hegemony. This should also be high on your radar because Trump is our goddamn president. Military interventions are at high risk. It's just a question of whether or not he'll be able to rely on things like diplomacy because it'll be easier from the app sets those conditions up the framework debate. Yes, you should weigh consequences. One is its key to cost-benefit analysis, which is a real-world portable skill that also our Wapner evidence says that you should be wary of when postmodernists like random Heidegger debaters tell you what nature and the environment really means. Man, it doesn't mean anything. Our Wapner evidence says that you have to acknowledge that things like consequences in life are biological prerequisites to understanding what your ontology even means. The Kuhn's evidence says that there is always value in life. We're going to flip the calculus. They say that this means that people are always disposable. That is not true. In a world in which you think certain lives don't have value, those are the lives that are able to be disposable and the ones that you can get rid of. That's the whole point of why they are able to justify things like inaction in the face of climate change there, because they might win some kind of root cause or a reason why thinking some way is bad, but that does not mean that they spill over to climate action. The app is a better and a pragmatic way to do things. This piece of blue evidence from the 1AC says pure theoretical approaches are never able to spill over, but advocating concrete solutions is. Finally, the Shell evidence says that the way we understand extinction should be uniquely framed, which none other evidence assumes. The Shell evidence says that it eliminates all kinds of future aspirations in human value, at the point where life always has value, and they destroy all future aspirations. That means that there is a constant and exponential increase in the reasons as to why you should prefer the way we view our framework. Also, the 2 in our views, consequences is the reason that ethical orientations are good, which proves that consequentialism is the reason that consequentialism should be your evaluation. They say that things like you should understand ethical orientations because it's what causes things like planetary devastation. That's a consequentialist understanding of the world. This also makes it game over for them for a few reasons. Either one is that the Shell evidence compares consequences of things like ethical orientations to extinction and says that we're the only team that has comparative evidence. And second, it proves that either they link to their which means that there is no performative benefit and they also cause these kinds of bad ethical dilemmas, or it proves that consequentialism framing is inevitable and there's no way for the alternative to be able to disrupt the status quo because this kind of thinking is inevitable. The reason we should have this thinking is because it is the root cause of something else. It proves that they're never able to solve those things. Even if you think I lose this debate, it doesn't matter because their K isn't able to access crap. First is the Caputo evidence says that being and understanding being is dumb. It says it never spills over into action because it says it's a useless philosophical narrative. Yes, it answers your argument because you've still posited away as how ontology is a root cause and yada yada. The 2 in our top explanation is the reason as to why you will never spill over into action. Based upon his Bryant says that markets exist, not necessarily that markets are good, but rather we can't act in the world as if they don't exist or don't have any kind of material impact. The Bryant evidence says that the way they understand the world ignores those markets, means they'll continue to function. One is that it means this turns okay because ignoring markets means that they'll be able to function on their own, which empirically has caused bad shit. But B is that they'll never be able to solve crime. But the F is it means that Bryant evidence is a net benefit. C is the Cochrane evidence is that the prior questions can never be settled because things like ontology are always sticky and they're not really truly able to be settled. This is like cross-ex questions when it's not really sure what it means for your ontology to be situated in liberal democracy, which all of your evidence says is bad. Finally, the Lake evidence says that they cause things like paradigm wars because you are able to say I'm this kind of ontology or I am this kind of understanding. It says that those are never helpful because they don't actually mean anything, but rather it just causes paradigm wars where we talk taglines at each other as opposed to actually talking real solutions. This is also a reason as to why even if they're right about ontology, we should not stop there and we should do things like implement the CVP because it's the only way to have real material change the technology debate. One is that there's no necessary link to the F. You're misunderstanding the Dreyfus evidence. The Dreyfus evidence just says that there is no necessary value in technology. Your evidence all assumes this is true. The Dreyfus evidence just says that there's no necessary link to the F. Second is that managerialism also if they try to say that their particular that our particular managerialism is bad, that means that the permutation is solved, or that there is no goddamn link to this critique, and that means we don't cause things like movements to die, or we don't cause any kinds of bad framing, because they have said that some kinds of managerialism are bad, but they have not told you what that managerialism is, nor how we are that. It's like they're reading a bad DA with no link or internal link argument. That's how you should frame it. Also, you should prefer. We're also impact turning. The reason that's why managerialism is good. That's the Haviland evidence. Managerialism is good. We need things like fertilizers to feed people. If we can choose to use technology to make the world better, but we're retreating from human-centric strategies to solve warming, leaves the environment to its own devices, and abandons accountability for a problem that we have caused. The Halpern evidence also says this accelerates a train wreck of human-induced climate change. And the Fieberg evidence says technological thought is inevitable and it's good. It says it's impossible to draw from technological discoveries. It's also impossible to divorce ourselves in that kind of rationality, which is proven by the 2NC, the 2NR's impact calculus frame. We should also channel the gut potential to reform modern technology technology, create better choices, things like energy efficiency. The Schellenhuber evidence says that is sufficient and able to solve. They also say things like links to Paris are bad, but they don't have any evidence as to why actual Paris is bad. A lot of their evidence is theoretical. The Schellenhuber evidence is much better, says what kinds of technologies will be implemented and how it's able to solve for Paris. You should also refer our piece of Fidrizi evidence, which says that status quo movements are dying, so dwelling in their movements don't matter, especially because their evidence is about Ethiopian farmers. It doesn't actually talk about how the United States is able to be held culpable for these things. If anything, the logical conclusion of their argument is that you should hold Ethiopian farmers accountable for climate change. That seems wrong to me. Our Hornsing and Fielding evidence also is able to solve their vulnerability arguments. Hornsing and Fielding evidence says that when you frame climate change as a risk, as something that causes extinction, it causes people to feel vulnerable, but it also causes them to want to figure out how to act. And the alternative will never get there, which means we are the only ones who are able to solve. Finally, the piece of Lester evidence is awesome. It says that anti-humanism is what causes things like racial inequity, makes settler communities which were made and abused through rejection of humanism. Means that even if the app is imperfect, even if humanism has some empirically bad qualities, it doesn't mean it is always bad. Never evidence. Our evidence says empirically they are far worse than the app will ever be.
Anderson.
All right.
Move it right along.
I love how we objectify Gary constantly. Just like, come on, clearly you've got nothing to do.
I'm correct.
Just it.
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, the decision is at 2-1 for the negative from Cal.
I voted affirmative. I thought it was a really close debate, but I also think that that this is a good example of how I sometimes have a hard time wrapping my head around ontology debates, and I found myself gravitating sympathetically towards pieces of evidence like Cochrane and Lake, and Caputo not so much because that card's kind of shit-tacular, but the Cochrane and Lake evidence I think is a little bit better. I feel like the solvency of both the plan and the alternative are uncertain, and I certainly think that there are risks of maybe a shift to worse things, or potentially worse things, or at least negating things, as per the Johnson evidence. New extraction will emerge, but I think that I also think that the solvency of the alternative is hard for me to wrap my head around in terms of what little the 2NR says about it. The Cochrane evidence, for example, says that there's always this level of uncertainty between discourse and materiality, which would seem to justify the permutation. I think that a lot of things, I end up concluding that a lot of things in the debate are going to be inevitable. I think managerialism is going to be inevitable. I don't know how the alternative solves it. I think global power relations are going to be inevitable. I think markets are inevitable. All of those things seem to justify the permutation. I think that the discourse, discourse versus pragmatism, or ontology versus pragmatism debate is a wash. By the end of the debate, the only reason that I can understand as far as the perm not working or the perm being bad is that ontology is prior. But again, I feel like the Lake evidence says that as long as we have those debates, we're going to collapse into competing faith statements about ontologies and competing ontologies, and those debates never go anywhere. And that at least casts doubt in my mind on the idea that an acknowledgement of the a priori nature of ontology necessarily requires a complete abandonment of pragmatism. So I think that had the 2NR spent a little more time on, or maybe a lot more time on why and how the alternative solves and overcomes the inevitability of things like geopolitics and managerialism and markets, then I would have maybe a better chance of saying, well, we should abandon pragmatism altogether. I also think that I also find the Shell evidence compelling. It suggests that we have some kind of responsibility to consider the concreteness of material impacts even in an imperfect world. There's other evidence that suggests this too. And I also think, I'm feeling throughout the debate that there's a concession of the inevitability of some level of managerialism. And I don't know what the threshold is for when that becomes too big or too much. And I'm sure that it lies somewhere in evidence. I just don't know what cited evidence refers to when sort of that threshold is met. I mean, indigenous farmers or African farmers practice some level of managerialism. Probably, as I'm thinking about it, it matters when there is this sort of crushing hegemonic paradigm that crushes alternatives. And I know that that's mentioned, but I look for where that is actually happening or is articulated, and I'm not finding it. So it seems to me that, the permutation can solve for or can't. The permutation seems to suggest a world where we can make policies and be self-reflective about that. And given the inevitability of all of these bad ways of thinking, and me not really understanding how the alternative solves for those, and also that nothing really in the negative seems to answer the immediacy of extinction impacts. And if managerialism and geopolitics are inevitable, then again, the permutation seems like the best option in the end. Particularly, I think probably the lake evidence, in my mind, is the most persuasive in terms of sort of the futility of abandoning some kind of concrete or material approach in favor of deciding the debate on a prior question of ontology. And if there is some level of, as you say, there is some level of manageriality or pragmatism possible post the alternative, then what would have been helpful to me is a better understanding of what that means, which implies a better understanding maybe of the conduits of solvency proffered by the alternative. So the alternative is going to change our mindset in these ways, it's going to spread in these ways, it's going to address the inevitability of managerialism, markets, etc. in these ways. And I just don't see that in the debate, particularly in the 2
I decided that the permutation is not very effective. I think that the Johnson card is a pretty sticky argument for you all. And I don't think that the 1AR or the 2AR has much of an answer to the sort of ratcheting down of expectations that the Clean Power Plan induces. And I think that combined with the Mabelock eco-pragmatism card that suggests that the sort of reliance on even just the idea and language of pragmatism locks us into low expectations for interrogating alternatives and to considering a sort of broader approach. So I did think that the permutation pretty much devalued the idea of difference. And I think that actually undermines a lot of the AF arguments, like the Lake card that I think that Matt put a lot of stock into. I read very differently, because I think that Lake card is like a multi-method, solutions are good, and that really is the neg and not the AF. They have won an argument that you are sort of a universal application that becomes where the AF is a hammer and now everything is a nail. And I don't think that you have really answered this characterization that suggests that the combination of impact framing plus pragmatism language plus the actual details of the AF sort of lock us into a universalizing solution that is not only inappropriate in that it is like insufficient in some way, but that it is dangerous in that it lowers expectations and generates a future that is less renewables, more fossil fuels, and as a result flips the case. So I didn't think that the alt mattered a ton, except for to say that the alt was a different way of thinking about the world. I do think it is a valid, different way of thinking about the world, but I didn't view it like a counter plan that implemented other solutions. So I don't understand even what the detail of the permutation would be. I think that at some point, talking more and characterizing the alt, and especially characterizing the alt in combination with the AF via the permutation, and probably both the 1AR and the 2AR could get you a lot of mileage to win a permutation for me. I'm not exactly sure how I get from A to C in a classic underpants gnomes card from take a break and then all of a sudden Ethiopian farming solution. So the next thing, I have lots of questions about how that would happen, but I do think that it's your sort of obligation at some point to walk me through the disconnect that exists there and demonstrate those things. I think the 1AR and the 2AR are both too focused on the sort of carded impacts to those things and not really getting to links to what the alt has done to cause them to be a sort of rampant anti-humanism as opposed to a very specific criticism of the AF. And so I think connecting that to the sort of, I don't know what you want to call the take a break and think about it, alter whatever it is the fuck that they're doing. You know, that, like the fact that I still have questions about that that's some leverage for you. You know what I mean? So I think that I'm susceptible to those arguments. It is like my favorite genre of things to say against case. There's just not a whole lot of characterization. I think to start a link to the alt has failed to do X, Y, and Z, and as a result, what's the connection? You know what I mean? Even in the places where the 2AR is talking about like the Ethiopian farming example, the response is like, it sounds like the app is making them culpable. That reveals to me sort of a constant misunderstanding, in my opinion, of what the NAG had said, which was that all of these solutions exist out there. They're just like really rough for the market to implement, right? Like if we decided to go back to like tilling agriculture as opposed to using sort of high industrial ag, we could do it, but it would be an enormous cost to the market. The reason we don't is because the market dictates the solutions right now. And so it's not because the Ethiopians are at fault, it's because we're at fault for not being willing to undertake the cost of adopting
do you think a better
those
way to frame
solutions.
that argument is just like, it's like we shouldn't put the burden on low-level solutions because the cause is because of the market? Like,
yeah,
okay.
like if you just said like growth is good, you collapse the economy, we would not be able to feed the world if we did the shit that you're suggesting. All of those are true, I think. Like the NEG has, in my opinion, suggested a solution that I think would require us to give up on mass industrialization. I don't see how they couldn't. Mass industrialization has a God's eye view of the world that suggests there's an appropriate way for development to proceed apace. I think you should just say, look, we're already too far gone. And that sort of fits along with some of your markets are inevitable arguments.
I think
needs
that
an
is like the argument
that
we're
needs an
trying to
impact.
make.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
markets exist, that's true, but the application of the market is a bad one that
Yeah.
goes the opposite of the case.
Yeah.
Is ultimately what I decided. Your inevitability stuff is like undermines the ultibility to solve it. I thought they needed to eradicate
Right, yeah.
the market. But what they've said is your particular market-based solution is counterproductive, basically, and has some DAs. A couple of DAs that I thought not answered the sanctions DA, not answered. The 2NR says it flips the diplomacy advantage because it drives allies away because we're putting too much pressure on them to abide by the sort of universalist regime of climate change. So there's some pinpointed little DAs out there that I think are reasons the AF would be bad, independent of climate, but I do think that the AF just like is insufficient to solve climate by itself and locks us into a mode of attempting to solve climate that is likely to make things worse, and that it is more reliant on bridging fossil fuels and less reliant on renewable energy, which is the ultimate solution to climate. So the one card that I think that there's like almost nothing referenced about this in the 2AR. The one card that there's like a passing reference to is the momentum card, which I think their card is a definitive answer to the sort of presumption of your card in the first place. I don't think that your card is like best case scenario, we keep having these meetings and continue to ratchet up, and their card is like, yeah, but here's how it actually works. We'll continually ratchet up according to the same economic standards that lock in these types of solutions. Why would we expect the future to be any different than the past in that regard? And so I thought that history was a pretty good guide to whether or not I thought that your optimism versus the next pessimism there ought to be preferred.
Do you think like a persuasive way to maybe reframe the argument is like ours is definitely best case, theirs is absolute worst case, like the truth might be somewhere in the middle, so if there's like a marginal benefit.
It could be a great benefit to perm,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Like we need to think about their solutions and how we ought to ratchet up to incorporating non-Western solutions. Maybe that's one of the next rounds of application. We're not locked in. We do have another chance to fix this, and so even if the first couple of years look like this, it could be changed in the future if our permutation works, and there's some way to sort of phrase the app as being more malleable on top of that. So I think answering some of the sort of ideological lock-in arguments from the eco-pragmatism stuff in combination with that could get you some leverage in.
So, did you read like the Schellenhuber card from the one I see about like Paris momentum? Because I don't know. I guess the reason I didn't spend as much time explaining like that internal link is because the Johnson card doesn't like take into account like the diplomacy that the app generates. did you just like not think the AF would send like a signal to other nations?
They had some answers diplomacy, like the sanctions DA, I think, is a turn to diplomacy. There's not really an answer to that in the 2AR. And even if we lead to additional follow-on, the sort of mentality by which we have judged standards according to the AF, and as a result, because I believe they lock on stuff on the permutation, it's not going to be any different the next time. You will generate momentum, but it will be the wrong momentum.
Okay.
It'll be the momentum for more LNG and not more renewables,
Okay.
right? It sets a standard that is not looking for a massive shift from fossil fuels.
Thank you.
Yeah, we saw the debate fairly similarly. I think that the permutation ultimately kind of fails. And I think that the case turns arguments are actually fairly strong. I think one of the more important arguments that kind of spoke to me was the fact that you leave in the current system of fossil fuel usage and the way that we have a consumptive manner. I don't think that the alternative is necessarily has to solve because the focus is mostly on orientation towards issues. I do think that a robust defense of like either hegemony or along the lines of like growth being good is probably the best way to go about trying to beat this K. I think that, they're fairly strong and fairly well ahead on the question of being able to solve climate change through these types of technocratic measures. The ability to kind of have the link, I think, to we have to set it out like, what is it, 1.5 degrees or 2, I forget which one it is, and set these types of standards, allow for optimization where underneath that we'll continuously go back to the thing, we'll continue to allow the market to flourish and work around that to try to, have these types of things work. So I think that that's kind of an issue with this affirmative. I think that maybe focusing a little bit more on like an external impact rather than kind of in passing, I think might be the best way to go about that. If you answer this like kind of sanctions DA, I think that you're in pretty good shape, and I might be able to move for you. I think maybe one of the better arguments is their entire thing is about how Trump sucks, and you're like, yeah, he's going to totally screw it up for the allies already. I mean, just like gut check, just kind of like point out that regardless of whether we are on board with Paris, Trump is already pissing off our allies. Do you think you're really going to overcome the whole Merkel thing where all that is going down, or the fact that he accused, Britain of spying on him? Like, these are the types of things that are going to continue. There's almost zero chance that this app solves diplomacy on the level that climate is going to overcome that because we decided to stick to what we'd already said we're going to do. And so, absent that, I'm like, I could vote there if there had been a little bit more on that. I think they're fairly well ahead on the question of being able to solve climate change. I do think that they're at least somewhat ahead on this value to life claim. I think that this type of relationality type claims are something that y'all don't really get to. The 1AR is kind of light on value to life, I think. I think that focusing more on that kind of aligns with what the 2AR did would be better for me. Because I have the 1AR on value to life literally just saying, where is it? Oh, there it is. I could find one with that. Wherever I put it, it was just like biological basis that there's always value to life regardless of anything else, and kind of everything else kind of flowed underneath. I didn't really have a robust extension like what the 2AR did, and I think that if you kind of focus on that, maybe focus a little bit more on the time frame to the impacts as well. I think you lose the warming one, but I think that you might be able to win the short-term time frame for like a hedge collapse causing great power war. Like, how does like an orientation towards anything resolve this type of an issue? Yeah, it might be inevitable. Living for, I don't know, 10 to 15 more years might be able to be a good thing. Those types of claims are kind of missing like an ultimate terminal impact calculus on either side. I guess on kind of like an explanatory issue. They're going for turns the case. They don't really have a large external impact that I can kind of hang my hat on. And if you're going to go for short-term impacts, we can see this type of collapse. We literally see Russia honey badger going on now. I mean, short-term risk of this occurring. Like, I can see myself voting for that. Regardless of these types of sanctions, where do these sanctions go? Are we going to put them on China, who's kind of like the questions that kind of came about this? Are we going to put them on third world nations where emissions kind of go later? Probably third world nations. Yeah. Are they helping us in our fight against Russia? Probably not. Right, so like those types of discussions I think are important to try to kind of beat back these types of like dissat turns the KC arguments. I think could get me to vote for you. I think it was a very close debate as well. I think that that's why it took me as long as it did to try to decide. It was only like 10 minutes shorter than him. So, yeah. Questions? I've more that I'd written down, but I think that Mr. Russell over here had covered almost everything that I kind of wanted to discuss.
I think that's just most of my questions. Okay.
Cool.
Matt, I was wondering, so I'm with you that, you know, the ontology first stuff, it seems a little bit self-collapsing. So scrap the top of the to and r about the framework claims, and even, you know, with some uncertainty about the alt, I'm just a bit perplexed about how much solvency you're given to have, given that the perm work has the argument about pragmatism and the CPP specifically locking us into fossil fuel economy, and then also the sanctions and geoengineering DAs as a critique of carbon targets as a policy response. I just don't really see where the AF is defending carbon targets as successful in generating a coalition that could decarbonize the economy. I just thought we were internally turning the solvency based on both at the formal general level, critique of pragmatism locks us into existing system, makes it inevitable. But even at the specific level, the CPP carbon targets are bad.
I think you're right that I didn't read the specific solvency terms that are sort of in the realm of policy probably very carefully, and that I was sort of in the mindset of, you know, in kind of looking at where that evidence was or looking at where those arguments were. I think I was sort of in the mindset of not necessarily thinking that, you know, that I sort of thought even if what occurs post Paris is a shift, for example, to natural gas and fracking or something, that was not necessarily something that was locked in. I felt like it was more of or I read it more as, you know, simply saying that, you know, that another method of extraction might occur, and I think you're right. I didn't really read it as a solvency turn so much as sort of an instantiation of maybe, you know, the inevitability of continued methods of extraction, but nevertheless buying their solvency evidence that it would at least lock in targets that would mitigate current emissions. So I think you're right. I didn't really. I spent most of my post round time looking at, you know, all of the K cards and didn't really read those. You know, didn't really read the shift cards as carefully as I read other cards in the debate. So that's probably true.
Well, thanks, Phil. Good luck in the rest of the tournament.